Today I want to go over the contract process, when you'll need a contract, what forms you need to fill out, how to create it, and just some references that you can go back to for contracts. So let me share my screen if I could. Yep. And I did send these materials to you and the links in your email. But if for some reason you need a reference or you lost that, you can always find those forms in the General Counsel website, and the steps as well. And that's what I want to go over today with you guys. I'm by no means a contract expert or a legal expert, so I do encourage you to attend the formal contracts training that the legal team does provide. But today I just want to go over, just a review of higher level overview of contracts. But I do encourage you to watch out for that formal training from the legal team. If you have any questions or if you know a different process, feel free to jump in and let me know. Because the process, I'm not like an expert on the process, but I'll try my best. So to start off, what is a contract? A contract is an agreement, oral or written, between two parties where there is a mutual understanding or exchange of promises or other considerations defined by the terms and conditions. So what can be a contract? Agreements for services, a letter of agreement, a PO. So whenever we submit a PO, that technically is a contract. We're obligated to purchase those goods or services that we already committed to. Terms and conditions. Whenever there's terms and conditions associated with any quote or invoice, that's also, if we agree to those, it's a contract. It's a binding contract. Contracts can be created or agreed upon for goods or services. What's a good? A good is anything tangible that you're wanting to purchase. So equipment or a computer or office supplies, anything defined as supplies, materials, or equipment that we're agreeing to purchase. A service, that's whenever we hire somebody separate from the university to provide services such as maybe a training. Maybe they're going to come to the university to give a seminar, or maybe you hire somebody to write grant reports, or you hire somebody to create a website. Whenever anything you agree to perform something that's for somebody separate from UW, that's a service and may require a contract. What if we purchase a good and there's services attached to that? Like if we want to buy an equipment, but there's like a service attached to it for maintenance or maybe the installation. According to legal or the General Counsel website, it should be treated as a service. So more likely than not, we will need to submit it through the contracts module so legal can review those terms and conditions. So that's a contract. I did send this link out, but if you need to reference it here and there, General Counsel does have all of this in their website. So I want to go over what the process is whenever you're purchasing goods or services and the supplier doesn't require a contract or they do. So let's start whenever they do not require a contract. So whenever you're purchasing anything, either service or good valued at less than $2,500, you can do that as you normally would. You can purchase it with a P card or a PO. That should go through fine through the normal purchasing process. But the thresholds that we need to keep in mind are anything valued between $2,500 and $9,999, and then anything over $10,000. So whenever you encounter any service that is between these thresholds, there is a process that we need to follow that UW has in place from the General Counsel department. So whenever you have services between these thresholds, make sure to check this website just to make sure you're following these steps. So I'm going to go over the forms that we will need to fill out. And I did send those in the email, but if you lose those, always reference back to this website. They are all linked here. I apologize. I shut my door and my other baby is crying to get in. So if that gets too loud, just let me know. Okay, so whenever, let's say you have a contract for, let's say, services to maintain your lab or an equipment, and it's $5,000. You're going to need to fill out first the statement of work. So let me pull that up here. So this is the form that you'll need to fill out. Essentially, it's just having the vendor explain their scope of work or explain the processes that they're going to be doing for you that you're hiring them to do. They're going to put their information, they're going to put the description, and they're going to put the total payment, and they're going to sign. What I do is I just send them this form and say, this is part of our processes. You could please fill this out. They usually do it with no problem. Maybe they'll have their legal team review it before, because we do have these terms and conditions that we are asking them to agree to. So they may have their legal team review it, and they may, if they do end up modifying those terms and conditions, our legal team will need to review it. But this is the very first, one of the first documents that you'll need to fill out. The second document that you'll need to fill out is the Employee Independent Contractor Determination Worksheet. So this essentially, this worksheet is also one of the forms you'll always have to fill out for these two thresholds. Essentially, it's determining whether they're a separate entity, an independent contractor, or an employee. You'll fill out their information, you'll answer these questions, and if for some reason you determine that they are an employee, then don't proceed with this process, because if they're an employee, it's a completely different process. You'll need to go through payroll to pay them, and make sure that, you know, all those taxes and all those other conditions are met. But if you do determine that, or this will help you determine whether they're an independent contractor, if they are, then you can go ahead with the processes. Sorry, I lost my audio. I need to switch to computer audio. If you lose me, just let me know. Give me a moment. I need to take care of my baby here real quick. Okay, sorry about that. Okay, so that's the independent contractor worksheet. That's the second form we'll need to fill out. So going back to the website, if you do encounter services between this threshold, those are the two forms you'll need to fill out. And then when you're creating your PO, those are the forms that you'll attach to the PO in addition to the quote that you're trying to get the services or goods from.
Sophia, you're not sharing your screen anymore.
Oops, sorry. Yep. So as I mentioned, if you do encounter services that you're trying to get between this threshold, those are the two forms you'll need to fill out in addition to your PO. When you're creating that PO, you'll need to attach those two forms.
in addition to the quote that they're giving you. And usually, general counsel does not need to review this. Procurement, their review should be enough. But if there's some terms and conditions that are beyond the scope of what procurement can review, then in some instances, you may need to go through the contract module. So general counsel should review. But in most cases, as long as you attach those two forms and they know that you already went through the processes, it should be okay. Let's say you have services valued at more than $10,000. Then you do have to fill out another more comprehensive form. You don't have to do the statement of work, but you do still have to do the independent contractor worksheet to determine whether they're an employee or independent contractor. And then in addition to that, you will need to fill out this agreement of services or the memorandum of understanding. And I have it here. And it looks like this. So you'll just fill it out depending on, the quote or the terms that they're providing. And it has the indemnification clause that UW has, the independent contractor insurance, any notices, sovereign immunity. So this is a template that legal created. So whenever we encounter services that are over $10,000, this is the process that we must follow. And this is the form or the MOU that we need to fill out in that case. Is there any questions so far? I know this is going through pretty quick. This should be short and sweet and shouldn't be too long. But those are the two thresholds to keep in mind. And even if maybe there's some instances where they don't require a contract, but you still fill out or want to fill out this MOU, just because of the department or any instance, if you do fill out the MOU, it does have to go through the contracts module. So general counsel can review that. So anytime you fill this out, it does have to go to the contracts module so they can review it, regardless of the amount that you're procuring those services for.
Sophia,
Yeah?
sorry, where does the sole source justification form fall in?
So that falls whenever, the bid and threshold policy. So whenever we buy anything, and I had that up. Let's see if I still have it up. Yep, here's a bid and threshold policy. So services and or goods. So yeah, whenever we buy anything over $10,000, in addition to all that, you do have to provide 2 quotes, or a bid or a sole source with that, because UW wants to make sure that you're getting the best price out there. So if you're submitting that quote and haven't, explored other options, procurement will reject it. So for services, thanks, Sonia, for reminding me, you will have to keep this in mind. For goods, you won't necessarily have to go through the contract process, but you still have to attach those 2 quotes, or if it's a special and unique supplier that you can't get anywhere else, then you would do the sole source certification. But procurement does have to review that before you submit your PO. Also, in other instances, if you are purchasing goods, let's say they're $5,000 or even $10,000, and they have terms and conditions attached to that, it will probably, most likely than not, need to go through general counsel to review that, because we can't agree to something that may hurt the university. So any terms and conditions, regardless of these amounts, general counsel does need to review those. But if it is between these amounts, the statement of work will cover that, because we do have our own terms there that need to abide to.
I think they just increased the bid threshold for equipment too, because I had to do a sole source for a microscope that was
Mhm.
over 5,000, and I think that's been pretty recent. I didn't see if that had the date with the new bid threshold.
This one came out July 2019.
Oh, okay.
So what was the threshold for you?
I was pretty sure it was 5, but maybe I was just looking at old documentation.
And you had to do that sole source or the 2 quotes?
Yep.
Yeah, sometimes. Yeah, I had to do 2 quotes too. I
Okay.
don't remember if it was 75 over 7,500 or 10, but I recently did submit 2 quotes for that. But yeah, the threshold used to be $5,000, so anything over 5. But they did recently increase it to 10. And that's the latest I've heard.
Okay, thanks.
So yeah, as I mentioned before, if you decide to fill out that MOU, even if it's for $5,000, it's not required by UW, but if you do end up filling that out, general counsel does need to review it. So for this threshold, $2,500 to $9,999, submitting the PO with these forms should suffice. But whenever it's over 10 and you fill out that MOU, you have to submit it through the contracts module. And I will go over that as soon as we go over this other section. So that's the UW policy whenever the supplier does not require a contract, but falls within these thresholds. If the supplier does require a contract, they send us a quote, and it has terms and conditions or it has some sort of contract attached to it. It will need to go through the contracts module, and you can use their template. You don't have to use UW's template, because general counsel will review it and cross out anything that will harm the university. You will need to, again, fill out that EIC determination worksheet, and then I would just reference the QRG of how to submit that contract, just because you won't have that memorized. I was going to mention something that I forgot. Okay, yeah. So if they do require a contract, you can use their template, but you do need to submit it through the contract module, so general counsel can review that. Also, I want to know, anytime that you do receive any terms and conditions or something that you need to agree to and that you need to sign, you can't sign, the department head can't sign, Dean Rasco can't sign. Only the legal team can sign it. So regardless of these thresholds too, just keep in mind that those terms and conditions, if they're asking us to agree to something, general counsel does need to review that, and only they, after it's gone through approvals and the signature process, only those people can sign. And then in our college, only Dean Rasco can sign contracts. We are in the process of adding Maria, our new director, so she's able to sign as well. But just keep in mind that you cannot sign a contract if it hasn't been reviewed by legal, or ever. Legal has to review it, and only the signing authority can sign. So let's go see how you would submit a contract. So you would go to financial management. And then in financial management, you go to the contracts management tab, and then there should be a tile called contracts. And this is where you will create your contract. I'm not going to create a contract right now, but I am going to show you the QRG that gives you step by step on how to submit that contract. And I did reference that, but if for any reason you don't know how to, or you lose that link, just go to the YCloud training materials, and all the QRGs for virtually everything are there. So this is step by step of how to create a contract. Is very thorough. So as long as you reference this and reference the general counsel website, you should be set to submit that contract. The only thing I do want to point out is step 3, or 2 and 3. When you are creating that contract, and it'll tell you here in the QRG, but whenever you are creating that contract, the name usually is the very first 5-digit org number, the supplier, and the month. And that will be easier for you to go and reference back to contracts. So just make sure to follow that naming convention. And then step 3, also I want to point out, just enable electronic signature. When you do that, it's easier for the supplier and Dean Rasco to sign. They sign via DocuSign. And it's just way easier instead of mailing the contract or instead of sending it separately via email. Also, last thing I want to point out here is that after it's gone through all the approvals, it's been reviewed and it's been approved and fully signed, make sure to go back and upload that contract. You can still upload items after it's been submitted. Upload that contract, that way you can reference back to it, or if let's say you leave the university, the next person can reference back to that. Usually the legal office is going back and uploading those. But if for any reason you want to check and make sure that the fully executed contract is there, I would encourage you to go back and look at that. And that way you can reference it if you need to. Whenever it is fully executed, fully signed, and you have that contract, then you can go and submit that PO. So you will need to create the PO, attach the quote, attach the fully executed contract, and attach the EIC worksheet, just so procurement knows that you already went through the process that UW requires. If they see that you didn't go through the process, they will most likely reject your requisition and have you go through this process. And if it's over 10 grand, if it's for goods or services, make sure to attach that extra quote or the sole source certification based on our bid and threshold policy. Based on the bid and threshold policy, also, if it's over 100, it looks like you do need to go out for bids on that one. And you most likely will also need a contract, especially if it has terms and conditions, and especially for sure if it's for services. Another note I want to point out also, if you're buying software or any type of license and there's terms and conditions attached to it, that must be reviewed by general counsel. Just because there's some patent issues and some other more in-depth issues that general counsel does need to review. So any licenses most likely will need to, or always need to, get reviewed by general counsel. If you purchase it through UWIT, then you should be good, because like Adobe and all those common services that IT provides, as long as you go through them, that's fine. But anything external does have to get reviewed, just because we want to make sure we're getting the best license, and maybe also we may already have it in our IT department that we can purchase from.
Sophia, I've seen like Dropbox or other outside storage
Oh, yeah.
research projects. Do you have any insight on those kind of charges?
I have seen people purchase Dropbox too.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's like a monthly subscription that they do. I haven't seen contracts required for that.
Right.
unless they're like purchasing something between these thresholds. But I see like my faculty to subscribe to like $10 a month for extra storage.
Mhm.
That seems to be fine. And then you just code it to professional services when you're submitting that charge in WildCloud. But I've also seen that. And as far as I know, you don't need a contract for that.
Mhm. Okay.
As far as I know. But legal might say otherwise. I wanted to go through the frequently asked questions as well. Also, before I do that, there is a checklist that can help you with these processes. I believe I have it here. Yep. So this checklist will essentially help you with each step that I just mentioned and help you determine what you will need. Like it'll ask, how do you want the contract returned? Is it going to take place in a foreign country or not? Is it going to be paid by a grant? Is it technology? Is it for construction and other things? And it'll tell you and it'll help you determine what policies and processes or who to contact if you needed to. This is just an extra form. I know a lot of people follow this as well in addition to everything else. It is not required to attach it, but it's just good reference to have. It also will ask you where you're going to pay this from. It's good reference to have for records. But it's not required. At some point it was, I think, but everything going online, everything changed. So now let's go to the frequently asked questions. So you submitted the contract. How do you know where it's at? There, whenever you submit your contract, if you follow the naming convention, if you type any org, all the contracts associated with that org will appear when you search it. So 12103 animal science, if I search that, you'll be able to see every contract that's been submitted by animal science. And you'll be able to see their status. It's whether they're active, pending approval, expired. So it's good to follow that naming convention, and also uploading the appropriate documents is for the record. So this is the only, this is the record associated with that contract. So it's good to name it accordingly and also upload all the documents associated with it. And also, as you know, this is also where we keep all the contracts or letters of offer for a startup. So if you ever need to look for your startup for a faculty member, just type in FSU or even type in the full startup name. You can see all the documents associated with that faculty member's new startup, which is a pretty neat thing that they incorporated just this year. So that's how you can look for any contract. I look them up by org number just because I have my org number memorized, but you can look them up by the supplier, who submitted that, plant science, 12105. They don't submit many contracts, but yeah, you should be able to see all the contracts associated with that org. There's also a report in the table of contents that you can run as well for contracts if that's an easier way to get there. And I can show you also how to do that. It's in financial management. Tools, reports and analytics. And so here in the table of contents, there's a whole bunch of reports that you can run, and one of them is contract status. You click on it and you can look at any contract in the university, or if you want to look at see if there's an active contract with a certain supplier, you can look for that. We're academic department. If you wanted to see all the College of Ag's contracts, you could do that. Apply, or if you want to search from the dates, maybe you want to search a contract that happened last year, you can do that as well. Or you could even look it up by the number, by the contract number. But yeah, here we can see all the contracts associated with College of Ag. I typically don't use this report, but it's a new one that they incorporated, which is probably more comprehensive than just looking at it in the contracts module. It gives you an overall review, which is pretty neat. I have yet to use this, but it looks pretty useful. And at the very last column, it'll tell you the status of where it's at. So if it's active, that means we have a contract active with that supplier. Or maybe signatures are still pending, or it's closed, or it's still in draft mode. This is a good report that you can run for that. Okay, so back to the facts. Is it internally generated contract required for the purchase of goods? No, it's not required. Like, for example, if you're doing services or you're contracting like operations or the plant operations, the plant department to come fix something in the College of Ag's building, you don't need a contract for that because they're within the University of Wyoming. Or if we're requesting a bid or something like that, or we're bidding out, no contract is required for that. What if the supplier requires a contract or university signature when you purchase a good? As I mentioned before, sometimes there's terms conditions attached to some goods, regardless of the amount. They will require general counsel to review, but in some instances, procurement may be able to review those, but they may send it to general counsel if there's some sort of disclaimer there beyond the scope of what procurement can approve. What if I'm purchasing a good totaling more than $25,000? According to the bid and threshold policy, it needs to go out for bid. Which isn't the threshold policy 100,000 or no, 10,000, either bid or 2 quotes. Okay, yep. Software must be reviewed by general counsel. There's like different policy for software. Is an internally generated contract required for the purchase of services? Yes, if the arrangement involves a professional service, totals more than 10,000, and the supplier has not provided their own contract. I wonder what internally generated contract means. So maybe we're contracting another department to do something for us. Looks like a contract will be involved for that. Construction. Services agreements cannot be used for restoration, construction, or anything regarding university buildings. That's why we have our UW operations department take care of that. And what if I am purchasing a service totaling less than $2,500, but you want something in writing? The statement of work should be sufficient for that, but if you do fill out that MOU template that legal provides, then it does need to go through the contract module, so legal can review that. Anything over $50,000, the bid and threshold policy applies. If it falls under those thresholds, a contract will be required. when you do create a contract for something this big, whenever you're submitting that PO, I recommend submitting that PO for the full amount. And every time they send you an invoice, receive that invoice and just pay that invoice instead of creating a PO every single time they send a contract. I mean, every time they send an invoice, it might be easier. And it's easier and faster that way. And there's a record of the full PO associated with that contract. Because every time you do submit that PO, you have to attach the contract and attach all the documents associated with that. So it's just my recommendation. If you know you're gonna pay $50,000 and the first invoice is for 10, just go ahead and create that $50,000 PO, attach the contract because the contract will have that specified. And that'll be much easier. Kind of like a sub-award, you know.
Sophia, would that still be true if it's like a contract that spans like a year or 2 years, like a service? Like each time they come out and service, it's going to be $10,000. Would you still do that? Would that PO stay open that long, I guess?
Is the, like with the contract associated with it?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you can still do that. I've seen some POs like that.
Okay.
They're just like sub-awards because sub-awards go through the dates of that project. Everything you've paid so far will show as an actual expense, but at the end of the year, it will show as an encumbrance, or the AP project, it'll just show up as an encumbrance that you just need to keep in mind.
Okay.
It'll just be encumbered for the rest of the year. But yeah, you can do that.
Okay.
So as I mentioned before, you can purchase some things on your P card and go through the normal process if it's below that threshold of $2,500. But as this question says, sometimes those terms and agreements, regardless of the amount, terms and conditions, may need to be reviewed by general counsel, because if they're asking us to agree to something, we can't sign on the behalf of general counsel. They need to review it. Procurement services may be able to review it, or if we need to fill out that statement of work, that may be sufficient. But if it's something beyond that, it's just safe to have general counsel review it. And I know that's not really efficient in a way, but that's just the policies that exist right now. There are some agreements that already exist at UW, like catering. There's some certain catering agreements that already exist between vendors and UW. Like, for example, there's I don't have the list pulled up, but there's some certain catering restaurants that we can contract to cater. If we already have an agreement with them, you don't need to create a new contract just for that catering service, because we already have an agreement with UW between those vendors. And I can pull up that list and send it afterwards. So if you're ever planning on having a catered event, business event, I would check our list of approved vendors first before seeking out another supplier or special caterer, because you may need to have that reviewed, because since they're services, you just want to be safe. What if I have a hotel and or banquet event order agreement? If the event will total less than 20, general counsel does not need to review. Send the hotel and or banquet event order agreement totaling less than 20 to procurement services to review. Okay, so there's a different process there for hotel and or banquet events. I've also heard about hotels that sometimes ask for a contract, like if you're going on a travel with a team or for some period of time. Some hotels do require some kind of agreement, and those do need to be reviewed by legal before agreeing to that. What if I have an agreement MOU that does not involve the exchange of funds. Currently, the Wild Cloud contracts module requires a contractor to be entered as a supplier. In this instance, just contact General Counsel directly for that unique situation. And the last question is, can you sign a contract? No. Make sure to always have legal counsel review it, and only the person who has signature authority can sign. Sometimes it's tricky because you never know. You think that it's just because it's a really small amount, but it's just safe, really safe, because you may be agreeing to something and you don't want to be held liable for that. Because if you do sign, then you can be held liable for that, not the university, but you as the person. So don't sign or agree to anything. So that's just an overview of contracts, when to submit them, the QRG of how to submit that, and the process that you need to follow. Is there any questions? I know that there's going to be like a lot of scenarios that probably we didn't cover, but if you do have a specific situation, reference back to this website or contact Andera or Fawn in the legal office or Tara. They're usually responsive. But if anything is suspicious or is not clear, most likely it will probably need to be reviewed by General Counsel. So I would just submit that to the contracts module. So the table of contract reports, you can run that contract report. Is there any questions on contracts? Usually you won't run into a lot of contracts, but if you do, reference that QRG. Don't feel bad if you don't have the process memorized. Every time I submit a contract, I have to reference that QRG because just to make sure I don't miss a step. But I always have it up just to be safe.
I've done 2 contracts in the last 2 days. We have a ton of them.
Really? Wow.
Service contracts, because our equipment is very specialized.
Oh, okay. You probably have to follow all those steps then, and the MOU and all that. Yeah, animal science does have some contracts, mostly rodeo, because we do lease a lot of steers and goats and calves, and we have to do those every year. But what Maria, yeah, what Maria was, I talked to Maria about this, and she said instead of doing a contract every year, maybe we can explore the idea of rolling contracts, maybe a 5-year contract. That way you don't have to submit it every single time if the conditions and the terms are not going to change. So that might be something to explore if you know you're going to have this contract every single year. Maybe have legal review it once for the next 5 years and attach that same one.
I don't know if we'd be able to do that, just because we have like we have a contract because it'll come up this next year for about 46,000 because one of our systems has to be like redone, and that only happens like once every 10 years, I think they said. And a lot of our equipment is like that certain things have to be done every 2 years or every 5 years, or ours are not ever simple.
Yeah, and you probably don't want to commit to as well to the next 5 years only using that vendor. So, but yeah,
we've had some issues with our vendor, with our incinerator, so we've had to actually switch vendors on that.
Yeah, each situation will be unique. But yeah, Vet Science does have a lot of contracts just because of your very complex equipment.
Yeah, maybe I should have applied for the plant science job. Don't come back because I said that.
I won't. Is there any other questions on contracts? I know that was a higher level overview, but as you're submitting them, I think you'll learn as well. And sometimes things are not always cut and clear. You know, Sometimes I didn't think I needed to submit a contract, but it turns out I did, so I had to go through the processes. But don't agree to anything before having general counsel review it. You don't want to end up with an invoice that you're not able to pay because we're not agreeing to the terms and conditions, or vice versa. So just cover all the bases first. I wanted just to show you these other reports that exist here in table contents, if you're not already aware of them. So the contract report is there, procure to pay is there, is to see the status of like a PO. You can run that report. You can run a report and see how the status of your invoices are. You can run reports on outstanding P cards or P card transactions, expense reports, whether they've been submitted. You can see whether they've been rejected or pending approval. The status is on cash advances. There's a report for that. And those are just really handy reports that you can just reference to that are available here. The outstanding P card transaction is a good one because you can keep track of your faculty's P cards. You know, if they're falling behind, just give them a reminder or send them that reminder. So that's a good one. These HR reports I'll go over when we do the HR training. I'll go over all the HR reports you can run. But here, and I believe in the last training, Cheyenne mentioned the budget to account. So it'll show you what you budgeted for your accounts there. I honestly haven't used these reports very often. I use the transactions by period more often, but I've just switched over to the account analysis report now because that seems to be more encompassing. You can manipulate it and change the data as you need it in the account analysis. General ledger balances, I'm not too familiar with that one, but that's another one out here that you can explore if you needed to. But I think that your go-to would be the account analysis for that, because that will show you the budget, also show you the budget as well. But just table of contents is a really handy thing to keep saved, because you also have grant reports that Winter will go over in a separate training. And then these HR reports are really handy.
Sophia, did you go over how to get to the table of contents if you haven't already favorited it, either on the reports and analytics or like in your favorites up top, kind of by your profile?
I will go over that. I haven't, because I do have it saved, but that's a good point. I'll click out and show you how to save it. I have a whole bunch saved just because you have to click into so many folders just to get into it. So if you click that little star, it'll just always be there when you click on reports and analytics. And all these HR reports, I will go over those in our HR training because there's some good ones there. But for table of contents, I'm gonna have to look. So you go to shared, your shared folders, custom, let's see, financials. Yep. Oh no. I'm gonna have to go back because since I saved it, I don't even know.
I can always do that. It doesn't like give me the full. I'm looking at it there, but I'm not seeing.
It doesn't give you the full, yeah.
The full thing. Where is it?
But once you save it, you'll never have to go through the folders again. So let me just click on this real quick to see. Okay, so shared folders, custom, then dashboard and table of contents. Okay, let me try that again.
I brought that up too, so if you need a reminder.
Okay, so shared folders, custom. And if you click into each of these folders, there's so many reports that also exist out there that they're just not on the table of contents, but may be useful if you want to explore those folders. But dashboards, and then there should be table of contents. And I would just click that star there. That way it's always saved. And if you find another report that you like, make sure to click that star. That way you're not always having to click through the folders. Is there any other questions or reports that you want me to talk about? Or just any other in general questions now that you have us here?
Sophia, I got one question for you.
Yeah.
Is there typically like a date that contracts are due by, or is it like it can be processed anytime during the month?
There is no due date associated with contracts. But what I do is I make sure I submit the contract before I submit that PO, because it's required. And just so let's say I know that I'm going to have like services that we're going to have in January, I would just submit it as soon as you can. But there is no due date. Usually general counsel will review them as they come in. If you need something priority or ASAP, I would just plan accordingly, because they do take a little while to get approved. The longest I've had mine get approved is like a couple months, but the fastest is like a day. So there is no due date, but I would just advise you to plan accordingly if you know a contract is going to be required for that specific PO that you need to submit. Good question. General counsel is doing better at approving these things. If it's taking too long, make sure to reach out to them. Their contact info should be in the general counsel website. Or if you're ever not sure whether you'll need a contract or just have general questions on any legal things, or just a question on how to handle something in particular, I would just reach out to them directly. They're really nice. Oh, your baby's so cute.
Appreciate
Yep. Yep, no problem. If there's any other questions, let me know. I'll follow up with that list that I mentioned earlier about the catering agreements we already have with UW. I'll send that in an email. But if there's no other questions, I hope this was helpful to you. Don't hesitate to reference the QRG every time you submit a contract, because that will guide you, especially if you're new to contracts on that.